Breaking news update for you now out of Kuna, where we have been following all morning a fatal school bus crash. We now know 11-year-old Daniel Robert Cook of Kuna died in that crash. I want to take you now live to a news conference that's happening in Kuna. Let's listen in.
All right, Corporal Davidson, can you kind of give us a rundown of what exactly happened this morning and give us the details as you know so far?
Basically, there was a dump truck northbound on Happy Valley Road. A school bus was eastbound on Deer Flat Road. There is no traffic control for Happy Valley Road. There are stop signs for crossing traffic on Deer Flat. The bus was coming away from the intersection, the stop line, and into the path of the dump truck. The particulars are under investigation at this point in time. And as you can see, or might be able to see here in a minute, we're going to be doing an accelerator test for bus. There's a bus of the similar make and model. They're going to be doing a test. This is part of the investigation. They're going to use that to reconstruct, with that information, reconstruct the crash. The kids have all been accounted for. Parents have been notified.
Corporal, there was some confusion. 12 students on the bus at the time of the crash. Any reason why there were different numbers coming out?
Yes, good question. One of the local parents came to the scene and took two of the children from the crash scene before I arrived. And I was one of the first law enforcement officers on scene. When I arrived, there were already fire and EMS personnel on scene, recovering what they could, and there was a lot of people here, so it was very easy for somebody to come into the scene and take two of their kids and go home. And before I got here.
Any positions if a parent came and picked them up?
Treated and released.
Those are the children at the hospital, or the children that were
the two children that were picked up by a parent from the scene before I arrived. The mother took them to the doctor and they were treated and released.
What can you tell us about the 4 children that were hospitalized after the crash?
I don't have any information on their condition. The best information I have right now is they are still being treated.
You're going to do the speed test, but do you think that weather was any kind of a factor? Do you have any inclinations as to what exactly happened that caused it?
Weather-wise, when I arrived, it was clear, or the roads were dry. It was cloudy, but it was approximately 7:30 in the morning, so it was beginning of daylight. Speculating about the cause, I'm not going to do that. We're still in the middle, as you can see. There's still guys working on the crash scene right now, doing their investigation. So the basics. The dump truck did not have a stop sign. They met in the intersection.
So there were 12 children on the bus. Can you tell us their ages and what grades they were in?
I don't know all of their ages. Yes, there were 12. I did talk to a 5-year-old that was not injured before the 5 that were not injured were taken to school. She was the youngest one, I believe, that I talked to. The rest of the ages, they were all being taken to an elementary school.
We know one child was killed. Can you tell us anything about that child and what you guys have found out so far?
Corporal, we know that was a little boy. Can you give us a name or an update on the family?
The family has been notified, and the name, I believe that's been released.
The Associated Press is reporting it as Daniel Robert Cook, 11 years old.
Is that?
We haven't released that, but someone else has.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm not going to release that information now. I do know that the parents have been notified. He was, it was a male, yes. And I can tell you that the best information that I've got right now, it was, even though it looks like the speed or the crash dynamics were low speed, there was a lot of weight involved. You got a heavy vehicle being struck by a heavy vehicle, and so any impact, particularly to little bodies, it's going to do a lot of damage.
Talk about how hard it is for investigators to get onto a scene like this.
Investigators to get onto a scene?
When there's children involved.
Well, I'll elaborate, I think, on when there's children involved on a school bus, one of the major difficulties is getting the care for the kids that are injured immediately and tracking their names as fast as they're being taken away for medical care. And this, thankfully, there weren't that many. There's only 12 on the bus, but that in itself was a task throughout the morning to try and track everybody down.
And I know a lot of the investigators here are parents, and a lot of them very shaken up after seeing the scenes. Some neighbors we talked to. How hard is that just when it does hit so close to home?
It's difficult. You mentioned parents. This is a school bus. This was part of the route locally here. Parents that their kids were on the bus, they came to the scene, and dealing with them, that is a very difficult factor while we're trying to conduct an investigation, make sure that kids are being taken care of, making sure that they're getting medical care if they need it, and matching up parents with their kids wherever those children might be, whether they're waiting on the bus or trying to get them to the school so they can meet up with their parents. If they've been taken to multiple hospitals, we got to figure out which hospital the ambulance took the children to, and matching that is very difficult.
Corporal, no doubt you've seen a lot. How do you feel when you show up to a tragedy like this?
I'm very sad. I want to cry.
I think we can all share that sentiment. Just a quick update on the school bus driver or dump truck driver.
I talked to the dump truck driver, and he was very distraught. I talked to the school bus driver, and she was very distraught. Neither one of them had any serious injuries, if any physical injuries that I was aware of. But I did talk to both of them, and they've got this to deal with in their own way, and it's going to be hard for them.
I would imagine that what they said is key to exactly to your investigation. What did they say? What did they see?
The bus driver was pretty emotional. She didn't have any clear information that I can use. She was very upset. The dump truck driver, I can tell you that he was pretty upset. Obviously, he was doing what he could to render aid. He's the first one there. He knows what happened. He knows there's kids hurt, and so he saw the nitty-gritty, if you will, of the crash scene and the damage that had been done, up to and including the deceased boy. And he did what he told me. He did what he could to render aid to that boy, and he knew that it was futile, and so that is what disturbs him. So.
Was the dump truck loaded or empty when the accident occurred?
I don't know at this time. The commercial vehicle investigators, they would have that information, and I haven't got all the follow-up from them yet.
Corporal, were there any other witnesses besides the people involved in the crash?
I don't believe that there were witnesses that saw it as it was happening. I had people that showed up on the scene right afterwards that did their best to render aid as well.
Corporal, you said early indications were that it was low speed. Do you have early indications? Did you say that the dump truck driver might have tried to slow down?
The dump truck driver did tell me that as he saw the bus, he was trying to slow down. When I say low speed, I say that relatively speaking. I do a lot of crash investigations on the interstate where the speed is 65 or higher. So the speed here on Happy Valley is 50 miles an hour. So relatively speaking, if he was going 50 and then applying the brakes, he was. But the preliminary is that it was low speed. The vehicles didn't move that far post-collision.
At this point, sir, does it look like there was a problem with an equipment failure, or is this a likely human error?
I can tell you that on commercial vehicles, I had the commercial vehicle investigators do inspections on both the bus and the dump truck. The dump truck did have multiple equipment violations. The bus did not. Whether or not those are a factor in the crash will be determined as we work on the investigation.
Can you tell us anything about, was the child dead on the scene, or was he transported to the hospital and died later? Can you tell us anything?
He was dead on the scene.
Do you believe that the bus stopped at the stop sign and then was accelerating through the intersection, or did the bus not stop?
I honestly don't know that yet. That's one of the things that we work on as the specialists do work on reconstructing the scene. Their analysis will conclude whether the bus stopped or whether it failed to yield.
What were the equipment violations that you noticed on the dump truck?
There's a whole page of the inspector's notes, and I don't remember all of them.
What will the crews be doing here on scene? Are you close to wrapping up this investigation? How much longer do you think that you have to go, and what do you need to do?
I believe that we're close to finishing. The biggest, the time-consuming event right now is going to be doing the acceleration test for the bus. I believe they're done measuring most everything, and when they're done doing the acceleration test, I think we'll be done. I believe that the rest of the investigation has been completed at this time. The rest is just going to be follow-up.
Is there a chance we could see charges filed here in the future?
I would expect so, yes. And one of the determining factors will be the conclusion of the reconstructionist investigation, when they can tell exactly who's at fault.
And you're thinking by the end of the day when you wrap up this investigation here, or perhaps more time?
I might have a good idea by the end of the day, but the reconstruction investigation usually takes weeks. So it might be weeks before we have a real solid, convincing argument that would be presentable in court. I would have it, but probably by the end of the day, a best guess.
Can you release the names of the bus driver and the truck driver?
Not right now.
Can you tell us a little bit about the acceleration test? What information will you learn from that?
Good question. I won't get too technical. It's going to measure how far the bus would be able to travel from a stop. And in a crash investigation where any speed is a factor, whether we're trying to determine how fast a vehicle can go, or whether we're trying to determine before they began to skid to a stop. We use different tests to measure, well, they're all time and distance tests. And so this is a time and distance test which will illustrate the potential distance that a bus could travel in the short period of time. And they'll plug that into the whole investigation, and in the report they'll have hypothetical scenarios. If the dump truck was traveling 50 miles an hour, he would have reached this point in this amount of time, so to speak. So in that they'll create with the evidence, the most likely story of exactly what happened here. Does that make sense? Okay.
The collision happened on this side of the road or this side?
Best information I have is it happened right in the intersection. I hope that helps. Okay.
Is there anything else that you think is important to mention or that stands out to you about this crash? Have you ever responded to a crash like this involving children on a school bus before?
Not where there's been a fatality, no. Here you saw the...
You are listening live right now to
here.
Idaho State Police Corporal Tim Davidson, one of the first responding officers on the scene of that fatal Kuna bus crash. If you are just joining us, this is On Your Side coverage that has been going on all morning. Let me bring you up to speed on exactly what happened. Between 7:30 and 8 o'clock this morning, a bus and dump truck were colliding at the scene of Happy Valley and Deer Flat. On board that bus, we now know there were 12 children. 4 of those children were injured and taken to area hospitals. We can now confirm that 2 of those 4 children have been treated and released. As we talked about at the top of the hour, 11-year-old Daniel Robert Cook died at the scene of the impact of that crash. As you heard Corporal Davidson talking there, the dump truck driver trying desperately to render aid at the scene of the crash. In Corporal Davidson's words, he said, quote, "The dump truck driver did what he could." Quote, "He saw the nitty-gritty," and quote, "He knew that his effort was futile." Again, that's 11-year-old Daniel Robert Cook, who died at the scene of that CUNA bus crash this morning. The other children who were not injured on board that bus were anywhere between the ages of 5 years old, kindergarten students, all the way to 5th graders. They were headed to Crimson Point Elementary this morning on their way to school. Those other students were released to their parents. Obviously, Crimson Point dealing with this tragedy this morning and into the afternoon. I'm sure, quite sure, they have plenty of counselors available for all of the children at that school. Once again, the names and the conditions of the other 2 children still left in the hospitals not available to us right now in the On Your Side newsroom. Conditions at the time of the crash, people were wondering, was it icy? Could there have been fog? What Corporal Davidson told us is that when he arrived on the scene shortly after 7:30, it was dry and cloudy, no fog and no ice. We have a crew covering this for us. Jay Bates is on the scene right now. Jay, can you describe what's going on? There's a lot of commotion still at this scene hours later.
Yeah, right now what's going on behind us is you're starting to see some of the tow trucks and things come in to clear some of the vehicles that were involved in the accident. And at the same time, there are a lot of Idaho State troopers that are still on scene and on recreating the crash and investigation. In fact, we just saw a few moments ago they are actually using a second bus to kind of recreate the speed. We just saw it go through the stop sign as if the bus didn't stop at the intersection as troopers were testing the speed. Now they're currently backing it up to the stop sign and then starting to accelerate through the intersection, also mimicking what would happen if the bus had stopped at the stop sign and then pulled into traffic. Now, you heard Corporal Davidson describe that there were multiple violations on the truck that struck the bus, and right now that seems to be kind of a curiosity for everyone out here, because it sounds like there could be some charges filed, and most likely against the driver of that dump truck. As you heard, the dump truck driver was the first on scene and really the first responder to many of the children, and very distraught on this. But the way that this intersection is set up, whether the bus ran the stop sign or actually pulled out into traffic, is going to be the big question for investigators to decide who is to blame here for this crash and the tragedy that happened. Obviously, both drivers very distraught about what happened, but they were both fine. 4 children went to the hospital, 2 have been released already, and of course the one deceased here on scene. Now, he mentioned that many of the people are going to be working on this investigation throughout the day. We will of course be here live at 5 and 6, and we will have updates, including we are going to look more into how they're recreating this accident right now and what tests they're doing to try and figure out what exactly happened early on this morning. Live at Happy Valley Road, I'm Jay Bates. Today's 6 on Your Side.
Jay, before I let you go really fast, there seem to be a couple of trucks, dump trucks behind you there. Was one of those still involved in the crash, or has that dump truck been towed away, and these are 2 totally different vehicles that are now recreating the scene?
No, the dump truck that was involved is still here on scene, and that is actually a tow truck that you see that is starting to hook up to that. One left just about 10-15 minutes ago, just before Corporal Davidson started speaking to all of us. But that's the truck that currently investigators are looking into as to how it impacted the school bus here at the intersection, and hopefully it'll have a lot of answers for what happened this morning. Back to you, Michelle.
Thanks, Jay. I know you've got a lot of work ahead of you. Appreciate the live reporting for us. So once again, if you are just coming up to speed on this, 11-year-old Daniel Robert Cook, who went to Crimson Point Elementary School, died in that crash this morning. We're of course going to have the very latest for you. Numerous crews working on this story. If you have something to add, we'd love to hear from you. You can call our newsroom if you have a question, a thought, a concern. If you knew sweet-year-old 11-year-old Daniel Cook and would like to tell us about him, give us a call, send us a note on Facebook. We'd love to hear from you. A tragedy for everyone. We'll have the very latest for you coming up tonight, live at 5, 6 on Fox 9 at 9, and today's 6 on Your Side at 10 o'clock.